Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our August edition of Supporting Families. This is a great topic for all parents, I think, especially given the time of year, back to school, or maybe your kids have just gone back to school. So we're talking anxiety and OCD in the classroom, and we've got some fantastic guests tonight to help us through that, answer your questions. I'm just going to start by just going over a few different rules for the event that we're talking. So a little bit of intro, but if you want to take this opportunity and put some questions in the chat, or just chat where you're from and where you're listening to us live from, that would be appreciated. Just want to remind everybody that this live stream is educational and not intended to replace therapy. So for treatment-related questions, please work with your provider or contact a local clinician. The IOCDF has a great resource for this. You can go to the IOCDF online resource directory, and that website is iocdf.org/find-help. And then that'll help you locate a trained clinician or someone that might be able to offer teletherapy where you are. The International IOCD Foundation also is not a crisis hotline. So if you are in crisis or you are feeling suicidal or unsafe, please call. In the U.S., you can use the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Just dial 988 from your phone. There's also a website. You can go to www.988lifeline.org. That's one word, lifeline. Or if you're are able to, you can go to your emergency room or dial 911 here in the U.S. And if you want, we want to create a safe space, so please be kind and respectful to everyone. At the end of the day, we are all here to support each other. It's a great OCD community. Having just come from the conference last month, I'm still filled with that energy from all the crowd and knowing how wonderful the community is and supportive it is. So I just also want to note that this is being recorded on several social media platforms. So just be aware of that as you make your comments or ask your questions. And we will definitely try to take as many questions as possible. I certainly have a good amount of topics, and I definitely want to introduce my panel first. We have Natasha Daniels, Dr. Aureen Wagner, and really happy to have a parent here to support us. Mayra, I guess, Mayra, if you'd like to go first and introduce yourself, give a little bit about your story, and then we'll just go around the room and just have everybody just talk a little bit about their background.
Perfect. Thank you, Chris. My name is Mayra Altimari. I have a son, 13 years old. He was diagnosed with mild OCD around 9 months ago. And ever since, we have been navigating this OCD's arena and learning a lot. At some point, it was so bad that we decided that the only way was to learn ourselves and to do the psychoeducation. And from there, that's how I found IOCDF. And ever since, have been holding hands, and I'm not letting go. So finding great people here, and yeah, trying to make the best with what we have. So yeah, that's
Thank you and welcome. It's great to have you here, and appreciate you joining us this evening, or maybe it's this afternoon. I missed what part of the U.S. you're in. Natasha, welcome. I know it's early there, or mid-afternoon, where it's early evening here in New York. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm an anxiety and OCD child therapist, and I provide global resources for parents who are raising kids with anxiety or OCD through my online resources. And I have 3 kids with anxiety and OCD as well. So I feel like I know it from both angles. I certainly know the school struggles too. So thanks for having me.
Awesome. Great to be here. Great to have you here. And last but not least, Dr. Wagner. So great to have you here. And it was good to see you last month.
Yes, thank you. My pleasure. It was good seeing you at the IOCDF conference in Orlando. And I'm located in North Carolina. And I think Mayra's in Texas and Natasha's in Arizona and Chris, you're in New York. So we're spread across the US at least. And I'm a clinical child psychologist, and I specialize in cognitive behavioral therapy for anxiety disorders and OCD. and I work with children, teens, and adults. And I've been doing this for a long time, and I've worked with lots and lots of kids and families, and it's been a very gratifying and rewarding journey. And um, I also present a lot of workshops for parents and professionals, and have a lot of resources on my website as well.
Great to have you here. And by the way, I don't think I did my intro. My name is Chris Baier, as it says on the screen. I'm a parent of a now soon-to-be college sophomore who has OCD. I also been hosting and fortunate enough to host this for the last year. By the way, I want to give a big shout out to Jack MHA, who sponsors this Supporting Families podcast. So thank you, Jack, and also Kim Vincenti for the idea. Last but not least, I am the producer of Unstuck, an OCD Kids movie. Perhaps you might be familiar with that. Came out a couple years ago, and have navigated various stages of the school journey. So let's get started right now. In the U.S., we know right now we have a situation where kids are either getting ready for school, about to start school, or maybe have been in school a week or two. So want to ask the panel, when you prepare your kids for school, is anxiety in general? What are some things parents can look for, think about, especially when it comes to OCD related anxiety that might come from school? I would love to hear, I think we'll go around the room. I'll start with Natasha.
Yeah, I think you want to watch a couple of weeks coming up to school, whether you're seeing some behavioral changes, some like anticipatory anxiety. Sometimes a parent might be waiting for the anxiety, and so we might introduce it or think that it's there. And sometimes it's good to wait, because every new school year is a new opportunity. And so they may not be anxious, but watching for those early warning signs so that you can address it early. Because I think if you address it early and you're not waiting till the first day of school, you can proactively start building those skills and reframing those thoughts so that they can have a better outcome when they first start.
So starting to have some early conversations, but not necessarily being too pushy about it, because if it's not there, you don't want to start it.
Yeah.
Dr. Wagner.
Sure. This is something I work with all the time with kids and families, because, this is the season. The back to school anxiety is pretty prevalent. So one of the things I do is tell parents that it's really important to be proactive rather than reactive. Don't wait for trouble to happen, but think ahead, anticipate, and start making plans. Now, typically, kids are enjoying their summer and they don't want to think about or talk about going back to school. And so parents think, I'm not bringing it up because I don't want to get them upset. And I tell parents, actually, then you're both avoiding the anxiety. And as we know, avoiding stuff doesn't help us deal with it. So instead, you should talk more about school, not less, but talk about it in a very matter of fact or positive way, talking about, all the things that are positive as well. But then, if school is challenging, I would normalize the anxiety. Almost any kid or teen has back to school anticipatory anxiety. And, they need to learn what's the only way to get over it, to actually go do it. The more you do it, the more you get used to it. And then to make some very concrete plans based on your child. If your child has issues with homework or reading or writing or perfectionism or going to the bathroom too often or not wanting to go to the bathroom at school, you need to work with your child and perhaps with a therapist to very specifically think ahead and make plans for how to handle those situations when you get to school.
Yeah, that's great advice. I definitely have some ideas on what we did for getting ready for school. Mayra, what was your experience? I know before the call you mentioned that school just started in Texas, so I guess you had to go through some of the stuff, and the anxiety might have already been there. Or like, how have you handled it so far?
Yeah, absolutely. But I don't know which anxiety was higher, if his or ours, my husband and mine. So we learned to be included in the formula all the way as a factor, because if we are the one as caregivers guiding and setting up the pace of how we're going to be evolving and navigating through the issues or challenges that we're going to go through. So we also want to be part of that preparation. So not just focusing on him, but what do I need in order to be a good caregiver, a good provider of that calm and steadiness on the route we are following, right? So yeah, we triggered the conversations, we addressed it, because we also needed that peace of mind that he was going to be on board with us. So the plans that Dr. Wagner was mentioning were there. We did kind of a rehearsal, going through the pain points that we went through last year or the last couple of years, but especially last year. Okay, if this happens again, what we're gonna do? What's going to be the plan? Who's going to be around us that we can pull, and from this resource, we're gonna be able to bring answers and solutions. So the conversation is always about, we are not responsible for bringing the solution or the answer, but we are responsible for raising the flag and saying, hey, mom, hey, dad, hey, teacher, I'm going through something. This is happening. How can you help me? And yes, just rehearsing things that were serious issues last year, and making a plan for them. And with that, beyond that, there was a mindset, right? Like, okay, those were the specific cases. But in our mind, my husband and mine, we think that that prepares him as well to overcome other situations by knowing the foundations, right? The base. Okay, problem, issue, resources, identifying, raising a flag. So now the challenge is not going to be it's not going to be specific to that challenge, but it's going to be a way to react, as Dr. Wagner was saying, but prepared in advance.
Yeah, and clearly you've having gone through an experience before, you knew some of the things that could happen. So talking through that, making plans, and my guess is that someone's involved in these plans, so that he had agency in what's going on, and how he might be able to get support.
Absolutely. So that was when we could think about the same teachers part of this school year, because he's in middle school now. So some teachers were going to be there again. So that was easy. But in the end, as if we weren't having enough things going on around, we took a hard decision that was to change him to a different school where we thought that he would have more support. So now everything is unknown. Even friends are going to be new as well. He already knows a few friends from other places, like sports, a neighborhood, but it's a new school and a new set, and a very different one. So it's like extracting, going to the beginnings. What are the triggers, no matter the circumstances, no matter the setting, and what am I going to do? So half of the summer we spent about talking and rehearsing, thinking on his old school. And then the other half of the summer, when we took the decision, it was adjusting the focus now, and thinking, okay, what was the situation, no matter who was involved, and what we're going to do, because situations are going to be, the place is not the problem, but it's how we perceive it in our heads, right? Well, in this case, him as OCD sufferer or person, but yeah. So that was a conversation. In essence, it was the same, just adjusting settings, if that helps.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to give a shout out to the folks that are watching live. If you have a question or comment or an experience that might help our audience about anxiety in school or anxiety going to college as a parent or someone with OCD, please let us know. We'd love to talk about your question or comment. And one of the things that we did, which was helpful at the start of the school year, was my daughter would write a letter to her new teacher and explain what was going on. And that kind of allowed us to have an introduction with the teacher. And generally, one of the first couple of weeks in school, we would meet with the teacher and the administrators to kind of talk through kind of something similar that Mayra was talking about, like a plan for what happens if anxiety hits in school. Dr. Wagner, Natasha, I want to put this question to both of you one at a time. Some things you mentioned, the preparation and talking at home. What are some things that parents can think about? And let's focus on like school age kids, like elementary, middle, and high school right now, and then we'll switch to college. But what are some things that parents might be able to do when you're talking about kids, the new school environment? Some ideas that can help them kids get prepared. Dr. Wagner.
Sure. Excuse me. I just got a tickle in my throat. So generally, if a child is unfamiliar with a school, like they're going from elementary to middle school and they don't know the school, then helping them learn as much as possible about the school by looking at the website, talking to neighbors, siblings, creating familiarity and exposure to any kind of new school environment can help. Now, remember, sorry, one of the key strategies for handling anxiety and OCD is exposure, facing your fears with the assumption that the fears you have are false alarms. They are exaggerated. There isn't any real threat or danger, but your brain is perceiving it that way. So based on that assumption, then when you face the fear with exposure, then you find out two things. Nothing bad happens and you can handle it better than you expected. So you learn that you are braver than you think you are. And so that's sort of the key idea. And so any kind of exposure prior to going to school is very helpful. Even physically driving to the school, walking in the hallways, meeting the teachers, sitting in the parking lot, taking the bus route can be helpful. And then anticipating, like Mayra was talking about, what are some of the situations that could come up? Meeting new kids, you don't know anybody. How would you make friends? Providing some social skills, basic social skills. But then a big part of what I do with families is also plan for how the child and the family will be at home in preparation for school. What are school mornings going to look like? What is going to look like when the child comes home from school, gets off the bus? What does homework look like? What does bedtime look like? So we really sort of break down the day into those 4 blocks of time: the before school, the after school, the homework block, and the dinner and bedtime block. And we literally walk through what are some, issues that come up there and how will we problem solve them. And again, the more this is all talked through and problem solved, the better it goes. And again, you're being proactive. And so one of the tools I really like to use is the feeling thermometer. And this is a tool we use in cognitive behavioral therapy. It's a 10-point scale, but it's a nifty little tool that really kind of can be used in a lot of ways to understand how emotional or how upset or how overwhelmed you're feeling about something. And a quick guideline I give to families is to say, when our feeling temperature is really high, like 8, 9, or 10, our feeling brain overwhelms our thinking brain and shuts it down so we can't problem solve or think properly. So we should not even try to do anything unless our feeling temperature is 5 or below. And so let's take a homework plan, for example. Parents are often having lots of struggles with homework because the child is repeating, rewriting, can't do this, having a meltdown. And so we have a plan where first you get decompression time when you come home from school for half an hour. no discussion of anything. And then we have a structured homework start time. And then you look at your thermometer first and you say, what's my feeling temperature? And if it's 5 or below, then you proceed. But if it's not, then you have to take a cool down break, bring down your feeling temperature. Then you look at your agenda and you look at what work needs to be done and how to break it down and have planned breaks, not unplanned breaks. Unplanned breaks happen when someone is frustrated and overwhelmed and says, I can't do it, and that becomes escape. But if you make planned breaks, after every 2 sheets or after every 15 minutes, you have a planned break, then that breaks down the problem into much smaller pieces and makes it much more manageable. So anyway, this is just an example of how I would approach homework. And then I say, and if your child shuts down and has a meltdown and refuses to listen, then you say we need to take a cool down break. So don't try to push through when someone is really upset. It'll just get frustrating all the way around and be an experience of failure. Okay. And in the same way, we have plans for bedtime, plans for getting ready in the morning, plans for decompression.
Yeah, it makes total sense. I think as a parent, one of the reactions I had when our therapist was going through this was like, wow, this is a lot of planning I have to do. And I was not expecting that. So parents, if you're hearing Dr. Wagner's advice, understand that maybe your first response might be like, that's a lot. But that prevention and thinking through the entire day and the entire process will allow you to work through that system. And then when you establish that, it'll help you deal with any issues that might come up that might be different than like what your plan was. So I think it can be really helpful to kind of work through not just like how the early part, like you were talking about the preschool, the before school and the school part, but the whole after, and how think of bedtime and that bedtime routine and things that might be able to earn, and maybe time away from homework, family time, or watching a show or reading a book or going out for ice cream, whatever it is, can be super helpful. Natasha, I would love to, I know that you have this kind of experience as both a parent with kids with anxiety and OCD, and also your therapist. So what has worked in your life, and then what has worked in practice?
Yeah, normally they're both because I learn what works and try to apply it to my own family in the messy sort of way. But I do feel like Dr. Wagner is right that proactive planning and that structure, I think just in general, like having 3 anxious kids and being anxious even myself, I find that organization of this is the routine. This is what morning looks like. This is what we do when we get to school. This is what comes afterwards. This is a whiteboard. These expectations really calm the brain because they don't have to worry about what's happening next. So I think that is really helpful. The other thing that I want to touch on is understanding the core fear around the school anxiety or the school fear. A lot of times what I thought was the core fear for my own children, or for any reason, is often off, even though I think I completely know them. And so sometimes addressing that with your kids, what's the scariest part about going to school this year? And for the kids I've worked with, I'm kind of surprised sometimes the answer will be very specific. Like, I'm worried about my second period teacher because, I've heard that she's really mean. And this huge ball of anticipatory anxiety is actually just this one period. And we can address that. We can meet her early. We could have a parent teacher conference. So it might be the fear of throwing up and afraid of, what is the cafeteria going to look like? And where is the nurse? And what is the rules around me being able to get to the nurse? And so I think when we really drill down with our kids, what's the scariest part about going to school? And then they're going to give us an ambiguous answer. And then you get more meat from that. I feel like I always say it's going down the rabbit hole because they'll give you a little bit. I don't know. I just hate school. I know we all, sometimes hate school. But what's the scariest part? What do you hate the most? Well, that PE is horrible. What's the scariest part about PE? Everyone gets undressed and it's awkward. Then you're getting meat on the bone. And then you can proactively do exposures before you're going to school. If it's something specific, or you can really problem solve, get a 504 plan and develop something that the school can accommodate while they're working on it in therapy.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry. And that helped a lot, and we learned it in therapy as well. So the recommendation was to address this overwhelming situation that they would bring, or overwhelming answers, saying school is awful. I don't ever want to go back there. So to decompose it, just what Natasha was saying. So when we got to what was bothering, like the second period teacher, following her example, then we could come back saying, okay, so am I hearing that we don't like the second period teacher, or that we don't like school at all? No, mom. Well, no, friends are fun to, oh, sorry, to hang out with, and I like recess, and I like cafeteria. Okay, so if we are able to sort out the second period teacher thing, then everything would be better. Yeah, that would be my perfect day if she wouldn't be around. So yeah, by tackling the root, it's like creating the narrative for them. So now in their heads, they like school again, and it's like magic when the narrative goes that way. Yeah.
We similar experiences. I think I never thought of it as like, kind of getting to the root of the problem, but we had situations where science class was the class that was the issue, because some of the topics that were talked about, definitely some fears when the subjects came to like the climate and natural disasters, if that was being covered. And through that, we were able to problem solve with Vanessa in school. One specific issue I remember, in history class, they were talking about world history. Clearly, there's some films and books that talk about the horrors of war, or things that societies have done to each other. So we just had a conversation with the teacher, and she would kind of let us know if something was going to be shown or talked about, and then we could preemptively talk about that at home. Which made going into that class and going into that whatever section was going to be talked about easier for my daughter to handle. We have a question in the chat which is related to like older kids starting college, and this is a question about a son who's in college but also starting first job. So how would you recommend some ideas for this parent to watch for and think about when the anxiety is related to not just like the pressures of school, but then work and handling that. For my own experience with my daughter, who is actually doing both, it is she has found that sticking to understanding what her expectations are in school, and then for the job, and making sure that the job schedule can be as predictive as possible. So a job that might change hours every week, it was way more anxious and didn't really work. But a job where she knew, okay, I'm going to be there at 4 and I'm going to be there at 7 on Monday through Thursday and Friday. I know how to handle it. I can plan my day around that, and I can plan my schoolwork around that. We talked through, helped her not only talk through that with her, but also helped her talk through with the folks at work to make sure that the issue of schedule was accommodating for how she could help them. So that could be one example, because you want to make sure that you're, judging the job as well as the schoolwork, and making sure that both are being able to be handled. And then, I think another idea that worked for us, and I think has been working so far, is to let our daughter know that, in our view, the job is wonderful. We're glad that she's doing that, but push comes to shove, the school comes first, and we are okay if the job doesn't work out. It wasn't like, she something she likes to do. So, but the schoolwork is where we think that we don't want to falter. And so that allowed her a little less pressure to be like, well, I really need to have this and I really must do this because my parents want me to. Any ideas for this question about, handling college work as well as, a job?
I think sometimes it's like getting them to have more awareness of how will you notice if this job is too much for you? I think sometimes posing these like Socratic questions to especially our older kids to get them to take that independence to think about their own stress of what will be those early warning signs for you? Because a lot of times they won't even think about it until it's too late and they're imploding. And then they're like, oh my gosh, I can't handle this. And what is the most stressful part about your job? And what will you do when you have to juggle your schoolwork? And so kind of planting, I think, questions to get them proactively to say, I think I'll notice that I'm feeling stressed if I have no time for my school. I feel like I'm going to feel stressed when I start to feel like I'm having more anxiety attacks or I'm having more compulsions or because then you can support them, and sometimes we just have to like nudge them to think about these things because they don't often, so that they can have that awareness without you even directly saying, I'm worried about you and I don't want this to be stressful and versus, just let's just have a plan. How can I support you? How are you going to notice these things? Because that's what mental health is all about, is you taking care of yourself proactively and being aware of your stressors.
Great suggestion. I also want to take this moment to recognize that the IOCDS resource, which is Anxiety in the Classroom, does have a section on helping college-age kids. There's 3 great sections, one for parents, one for students, and one for professionals or like teachers and administrators to like learn more and handle different situations. So a lot of different links and things to read, videos to watch. I think there's even some like audio suggestions. So anxietyintheclassroom.org, right? Yeah, Amanda? Yeah, okay. Great, I got it right. I wasn't sure if it was .com or ., but yeah, anxietyintheclassroom.org, great resource to look at, and certainly was useful and had, and actually has grown as a resource over the last couple of years. I think there was a recent update. So good resource for you to look at. We have another, let's see, in this question. So Dr. Wagner, question about sharing some more strategies for cooling down from the feeling temperature. I'm an adult studying for an exam, and that seems super helpful. So how might, an adult apply the feeling thermometer in their own life and recognizing when, that anxiety and the emotional brain might be taking over?
Sure. The strategies apply to everyone, child, teen, or adult. We can all use the same ideas regarding our feeling temperature, that our feeling brain perceives threat or danger, and then it activates a fight or flight or freeze response. And so when we get into that 8, 9, 10 zone on a scale of 1 to 10, we're probably in that high level of threat. And so we might have a lot of physiologic anxiety as well. Our heart's pounding and we're tense and we're very distraught and upset. And like I said earlier, that kind of like turns off the thinking brain, because our brain is wired for our feeling brain to have an instant protective response and not have time to think if there's a real emergency. However, in all of these cases, if you're studying for an exam, it's not as threatening as being chased by a lion. So your brain is misinterpreting the threat of an exam as being a life-threatening emergency. And so being able to take a step back and recognize that that's a false alarm. And really, the feeling brain just needs quiet time. So don't try to argue with yourself or, desperately try to feel better. Just allow it to happen. Give it a little bit of time. Doing some deep breathing and physical muscle relaxation does help calm down the sympathetic nervous system. But mostly it's, again, just taking a little cool down break. That might mean set aside your studying for the moment, go take a little walk, go breathe some fresh air, go around in a circle in your apartment or your home. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. Okay. Drink some water. Sometimes a little bit of a sensory shock can startle the brain out of its going down the rabbit hole. So eat an ice cube or touch an ice cube to your face, or somebody suggested put salt in your mouth, and that shocks your system into redirecting its attention, and then you have to like get the salt out of your mouth. Okay. But anyways, test anxiety applies, like you're saying, to yourself, but also is very common in kids and teens, and especially those with OCD and anxiety. And basically, what I say to kids is, the more anxious you get about a test, are you going to do better or are you going to do worse? What's going to happen to your thinking brain if you start getting more and more anxious and your feeling temperature goes up? And they can all pretty much say, my feeling brain's going to turn off my thinking brain. Well, which part of your brain do you need to do well on the test or the exam? I need my thinking brain. So you see what is happening. The more you're worrying about not doing well, the more likely you are to not do well. Okay. So you have to recognize that you really need your feeling brain to be calm. And if you've done your preparation and you're studying and you understand the material, chances are you're going to do as well as you need to do. So you need to take down that threat level like it's an emergency and just focus on not on grades, not on scores, but on doing your best. And if doing your best means you got a B, then maybe you need to talk to your parents or a teacher to figure out, did you not understand some concepts? Do you need some extra help with certain areas? You have to problem solve those areas.
It's so interesting that you were just talking about the taking breaks, making sure that you are preparing yourself, but also aware and doing the shocks to your system. We have learned the hard way as parents that sometimes the ways we dealt with school aren't necessarily the best ways to talk to our children about that. Like, both my wife and I were big studiers. How we planned for exams was like setting up and making sure that we studied things and were prepared for the test or asked questions. Both our children are more like, we're going to wing it. We feel like we know the material. We're good. So us sometimes being like, did you study for the test? Did you study for the test? You need help with the test, was not helping their anxiety. So those in your life around you, it might also help to if there are people who know you're studying for a test, they might, it might be a good idea to say to them, listen, when you ask me about it more than once, it makes my anxiety go up. And so you can, get help from those around you by saying, like, leave me alone, or, I will talk to you when I'm ready, so that those are the things in your environment aren't necessarily adding to your stress, even though those loved ones might mean well. In our case, we realized that we were adding to our child's anxiety based on how we studied, which was not how they did it. I don't know, Mayra, if you have a similar experience with a middle schooler.
Absolutely. But also because the education system is completely different to what we went through. And I think that happens worldwide. I studied in a different country, and it's the same. We're not able to teach them math anymore, not even to our third grader. It's like, Mom, you don't know anything. It's not like this. The teacher is going to give me a 0 for this. But yeah, what I value from being in this conversation today and having a 13-year-old son that already has a diagnosis, and it's that he's going to be able to work on those tools way ahead than what the statistics say, because usually is further away in life when people is diagnosed. So your daughter and Natasha's kids as well, they had that blessed in a way. So through the 504 that some of you were mentioning before, now it's another big tool and resource that we have to teach them to how, again, decompose all these lion chasing them story that only happens on their mind, and to focus on what reality says. And it's like, well, chunking every task they have to do, going little by little, and prepare in advance to their test if they have to, Chris, because it's very efficient these days that they learn everything in the classroom and little study at home. That triggers our anxiety. again with the change on the education system. So I think it's great that because it doesn't happen only with tests and quizzes, but they will face at some point some level of challenge, either with homeworks, essays, or with a theater play that they have to do. Whatever it is, school expose them, right? And through this 504, they have the resources plus everything else that they learn through therapy and that we learn from as parents and cascaded to them. So as early as we can start, they're going to be better prepared because challenges are just going to be there in the shape of tests or any other challenging task like college and job as well. So I think to me, the essence is always the same, and the resources will always go around the same issue. And as they are able to master them, they are going to be more successful on bossing their OCD in the end.
Yes, keeping it's like kind of hinting at like the practice, and then understanding that they're giving them the tools to be able to support that anxiety. Great, yeah, they're able to handle whatever that new anxiety might be. You were mentioning 504, which is I think might be more like a U.S. focused issue accommodation in our schools. For those who there might not be familiar with it, or those who are viewing from different countries that might be able to kind of figure out how a 504 might align with something in their country, is Natasha or Dr. Wagner, is there like a way to explain what like the 504 is and how somebody might look into it?
You want to go, Natasha? Or?
Yeah, I mean, a 504 are like official accommodations, I guess that's how I would put it, where in the United States, it's a legal document, so it has a little bit of meat to it, that they're having struggles and you have a meeting. And I have seen in my community, people in Canada and different places have some rendition of this. I don't know how legal it is, but where the school will get together and you might have the teachers and the parent, the administrators, they might even have a counselor come together and will develop a plan, a formalized plan of like, what does this child need in order to be successful in the school environment? It's very school environment based. And then everybody follows that plan. And it's nice because it's formalized and people can get a copy of it and they can see it and be held accountable for this document. And then you can hold meetings and say, I want to hold another meeting because we're having an issue or we have a new development. And so it gives, it's like a working document that gives some help and support for the child.
Yeah, great. And then schools have to follow it and parents understand what's expected of them. Thank you so much for that. I want to talk about, we talked a bit about preparing for your kids for school, how to kind of talk about it at home, maybe make some plans. Let's talk about when anxiety and OCD is triggered or something happens in school and how your child or a kid might deal with it. What are some, ways you might suggest, in the moment, either helping deal with that anxiety or either potentially practicing some exposures? Dr. Wagner.
Okay, sure. A host of different issues can come up at school. They often have to do with reading and, rereading kinds of rituals, writing, perfectionism, needing to use the bathroom because the things are contaminated and they have to wash their hands, or sometimes they think they have to go to the bathroom too often because they might have an accident. Lots of different things. Social issues can come up. So, once again, everything we've talked about so far about being proactive and anticipating, hopefully, would allow these things to happen at a minimal level and with the child already sort of having some kind of plan. But every now and then, somebody will be caught off guard. And generally, when children with OCD are caught off guard, their feeling brain just immediately spikes into like a 911 emergency mode, and they might have a big meltdown or a big panic attack or something like that. And I think that should also be thought about ahead of time. Like, what would you do? What would you do if you had a panic attack? And generally, if you anticipate that your child is prone to having meltdowns or panic attacks because of their OCD triggers, I would suggest that it's important to involve somebody at the school to inform the teacher or inform the counselor. And along those lines, I want to say some parents may choose not to inform the school, and I think that's fine. It's really a personal choice for each family and a personal choice for each child who might say, I don't want my teacher to know, right? But the real discussion needs to be there's no right or wrong answer here. It's you have to weigh the pros and the cons in your situation. How will telling the school help you? How might it hurt you? How will not telling the school help you? How might it hurt you? Anyway, so if you've involved the school, then there should be a plan, and that might involve, like Natasha was saying, this can even be put into a 504 plan that a child may have a discrete signal with the teacher to say, I need a cool down break. I need to exit the classroom and I need to go to the bathroom and do some breathing. And then I'll come back. Or a bathroom pass, a pre planned bathroom pass, a number of passes, or passes to visit the counselor. And I say passes here because when you structure them, they work better. They should not be unlimited, ad hoc, like whenever you feel like it, you can leave. But if you set some kind of structure, you can have 3 passes a day, then kids kind of respond very well and use them very wisely. But if they're given free access to leave, then they don't know how to structure themselves and they keep escaping. Okay. So those are the typical things I would say to give them a chance to have a little bit of a break, to go to the bathroom, to walk in the hallway, to go to the back of the classroom, um, bring down their feeling temperature, cool it down, and then resume. Now it's a big trigger and things are not going well, then you really have to come home and discuss how to handle it differently, talk with the school, talk with your therapist, maybe plan some exposure exercises that can be done at home and then at school.
Great suggestions. We definitely took one of those. My daughter had a signal that she would give her teachers, and that would give her the ability to kind of step outside. And if something was really bad, she was able to go visit the sit in the vice principal's office and cool down. So Holly suggests that. Mayra, have you done a similar communications with schools or teachers, or at least giving your son an understanding of where he might be able to handle his anxiety if it does spike in school?
Yes, Chris. Actually, last year, 7th grade, we spent a lot of time at school meeting with the whole staff because this school, as supportive as they were, they didn't have the capacity to provide these extra resources for kids with special conditions or neurodivergent. So they wanted to help, but they were following the 504 as much as they would know about it. So it was a private school, and then legally it doesn't apply for them. So we were the ones coming to the school with a proposal of what accommodations, the accommodations that he needed were, while we were learning as well. And we came from knowing nothing about it, never heard before about OCD. So it was tough on that sense. We grew a lot. I think for the other kids that now the school knows about their OCD condition, if there's any other, it would be easier. But yes, we had to come to conversations, negotiations, because of course school has their own frame and they need to operate and still make the kids perform. And yeah, we managed to survive and to navigate and to grow a lot. There was a lot of compassion, grace, and empathy, but to a certain extent, when the knowledge is not there. So we had to find our own teachers that were advocates, that went through something similar, and then that made it easier. But yes, and even in schools where 504s are enforced, I think that, I don't know, Natasha and Dr. Wagner, but I think that parents or caregivers need to be involved and to have these regular meetings to be sure that the kid is not lost among the mass. And that their specific needs are heard, because 504 could mention about, it's very broad, right? What it considers. But for OCD, we know that also school refusal is there. So how are we going to address school refusal for the kids that have it? In my case, that happened. So just today we had a meeting with the counselor. It's our first week at school. And yeah, we plan to have one quarterly, or probably more. Well, quarterly is the minimum required by the school, but we plan to be there. I don't know if every month, or at least exchanging emails. It's tiring, but for us, we saw how sticking to the plan ensures success to our son. And Natasha and Dr. Wagner were mentioning before how routine is important, and to stick to that routine and to that structure. So yeah, it becomes a habit now. And when you were talking about the preschool plan, homework plan that Dr. Wagner were explaining, at the beginning it's very hard, especially if you don't come from there. But then it's a matter of creating habits, and it just happens. Yeah.
I think you just highlighted something really important out of that. If a parent has a takeaway, it's like your role can be the advocate. You will not be, you're not the one necessarily living with OCD, dealing with the anxiety that comes for it, but you can be the advocate. So meeting with schools, making sure you're proactive in that space. And, and also educating yourself. It's always job one when you first get diagnosed. What do I know? What can I know? And how do we take action on things that when we need to learn about them? I definitely want to get to a topic which you just touched on, which was what are the responsibilities and realistic expectations that parents should have of teachers in the school system? They are not therapists. They are not trained to deal with OCD. We might think that sometimes they should be doing more, but I don't know, Natasha, how would you, how can parents think about the role that their teachers or their school administrators can play in helping their kids, with anxiety or OCD?
Yeah, sorry about the noise. I don't know if you can hear it, but
I got a cat meowing in the background, so
we all got something at this hour. Yeah, I think it's a great question, because the more educated you get as a parent, the more you realize how uneducated the staff might be, the teachers, the administration, in particular OCD. And you might get that gem that just this teacher or this counselor just really gets it from their own experience or their own education. But they don't always, and they're not really expected to. It's like pediatrician's not supposed to be a cardiologist. I'm going to go to a cardiologist. And so I think taking that advocacy role and educating them, and always framing it, in my opinion, like how it's impacting their school environment. And so writing letters, or having the therapist write a letter for you that crafts, like, this is the struggle, maybe a resource, an article, this is what you can read, because a lot of these OCD themes are going to be so random to the school. They're not going to understand harm thoughts or moral scrupulosity type of thoughts. This is way out of the realm of the general understanding of OCD. So educating them, sending them articles, sending them to the IOCDF, and then crafting a letter where it says, this is their struggle. This is how it shows up in school, right? They have Just Right OCD themes. Here's an article on Just Right OCD themes. And it will show up in school. They're going to have to write and rewrite. So you might think they're being a perfectionist and trying to get, rewriting their letters because they want the sentence to make sense. But it might just be that the T is just not hitting the top of the line. And this is the accommodation that we want, or this is the response we want, which might be a therapeutic response. It might be an accommodation, depending on where that child is at. But not assuming and getting angry. I know it's so easier said than done, that they will understand OCD. We have to go in almost with the idea of that we have to educate them. which is unfortunate. And hopefully down the road we'll make progress and that won't be the case. But I feel like that's the lens we have to look at.
Yeah, the anxiety in the classroom does have a teacher section. So if you're looking for like a link to start with, or a parent could go in there and maybe find specific things. It's interesting you bring up how a teacher's role. Sharif, if you've seen Unstuck, an OCD Kids movie, Sharif in the film had perfectionism. And one of the things that his parents had to work through with their teacher was not to hold him up as the prime example of a perfect student, because it was driving his anxiety. So he was like, I have to be in front of the class as this. I'm the ideal student. My teacher keeps saying everyone should act like Sharif. The paper should be as clean and organized and perfect spelling. And so they had to work. Sometimes you might need to work with the teacher to necessarily change how they react. But in our experience, we made it clear that we didn't expect necessarily the teachers to be involved in the therapy or do the therapy. We just wanted the lines of communication. So if there were issues happening in school, we could address it and then deal with it. So those lines of communication, like you talked about, also super important. I think it'd be wonderful if parents, administrators, teachers and administrators were more educated. That's the goal of talks like tonight, as well as resources that are out there on different sites, and educating not just on anxiety but OCD and specifically. Dr. Wagner, anything specific that you would add to what Natasha was just talking about as far as the roles of and responsibilities, expectations for teachers or schools and administrators?
Sure, I agree with everything Natasha said. I would just add to that also that teachers are teaching 20 to 25 kids in their classroom, right? And these days, a lot of kids have different kinds of neurodivergent needs. So think about, how hard it can be for them. They can get overwhelmed, and their core mission is actually just to teach, math and science and social studies or whatever it is. So I would also be thoughtful about that with a teacher and, mostly focus on educating them so that they don't misunderstand your child. Or, as Chris pointed out, the child who's held up as the model student inadvertently by the teacher who thinks he or she is actually reinforcing and, rewarding this child, but it's actually kind of backfiring. So I would suggest really trying to work with a counselor, social worker, school psychologist in your school. They are mental health trained school professionals. So I would put more weight or more emphasis on trying to connect with them. And they become sort of the team leaders that then disseminate to the teachers what the teachers need to know rather than expecting a whole lot directly from a teacher. Okay. The other thing I say to parents is whatever you are hoping the school would help with, keep it realistic, right? They are not going to deliver exposure therapy. That isn't their role. So let's work together on what is the, you know, minimum your child needs to be able to meet their educational goals, to be able to function academically and socially and behaviorally in the classroom. The rest of it we can take care of outside here with therapy, but just enough. So if you give them like 6 sheets of forms to fill out every day to tell you how their kid did, that's not going to happen. That they're going to be too burdened with that. So we don't want to overburden teachers either. So we want to be practical and realistic and understand that they are doing a different kind of job too.
Absolutely. Thank you. So a good reminder about the school counselors and expectations. Mayra, last question to you, slightly different topic, but how have you been able to help your son navigate the friendships in school, or like kind of that anxiety around meeting new kids? And I don't know if the OCD has played up there, but because that's another the social factor of school can also play into that anxiety. So any things that you've learned over the last year to help with that, social and the friendship angle of what happens in school?
Well, Chris, on his case, it's very social. So all the triggers come from schoolwork and being there every morning. but and then but but he felt different, weird, and unfortunate because of having OCD. So maybe I can relate your question with how he's embracing his OCD and how he explains it to his friends, because it does interfere with his school performance. And being a bright kid, we all would. His mom, right? So am I supposed to say that? But he's he's very smart, so his grades were never the issue, even without attending to math, for instance, and just meeting with a tutor once a week. He would have the highest. So he was not attending to certain classes. He was OCD can get very mad if the plan is withdrawn all of the sudden, right? If the structure or accommodations. So if through this plan everything was better, and the teachers would think, okay, he got better, we are there, and then they wouldn't follow the plan anymore, then he would have another crisis. So how he would explain that to his friends that were expecting different from him? So how come you're not turning in this homework if you can do it? So eventually he thought he was going to die, and he was very scared, until he was able to know that it was just a neurodivergency like any other, and he was the therapy and a lot of books. Your short, for instance, and through different resources, a lot of talking, and also meeting with the counselors. And he was seeing, because he was already 12 years old, he's very aware and understood. So meeting with the teachers and having the assurance of the teachers that everything was going to be okay. Counselor and another teacher that was his mentor made the difference for him and made him know that they were realizing about the things that were not going right and not as expected, but that working through a plan, they would expect him to be engaged and also give them feedback. And that's how he opened up to say, okay, this is OCD, it's manageable, let's do it. And that's how he started talking about OCD with his friends and explaining why some days he couldn't be there on time or at all.
That's great. The support system really, not only benefited him, but he was able to kind of turn what he learned and then educate his friends, or just talk to them so they could understand why certain, he might have a different responsibility with schoolwork, still doing it, but how he was able to handle it. So that's awesome to hear. And just want to, unfortunately, our time is up for this hour, but thank you, our panelists, Natasha and Aureen and Mayra. Really appreciate your perspective and ideas around here. Again, if you are just watching here on replay, anxietyintheclassroom.org, great resource that the IOCDF has to help parents, teachers, students. Even there's sections on siblings, so can help a variety of folks, and there's changes happening on that site all the time, so you can keep refreshing the content. Just want to remind everybody that the IOCDF is a donor-supported nonprofit, so if you have found value from tonight's conversation or attending conferences or resources, they certainly could use your support. Anything you can donate at iocdf.org/donate would be incredibly appreciated. There's also membership opportunities. You can join as a member. Don't forget, you can subscribe to the IOCDF social channels. There's a YouTube channel where you'll be able to see all the live streams. Follow them on Facebook, X, Threads, Instagram. They're on all the socials. So look forward to that. Lots of content, different content there. And I just want to remind you that the next live stream, there are a lot of live stream events pretty much every day of the week, I think. There's one coming up on Tuesday. That topic is faith and OCD. It's a roundtable. And on Wednesday, August 21st, there is an Ask the Experts panel. So lots of more content coming up, and we'll be back next month with the supporting families. Till next month, thank you tonight for my guests, and hope you are all well. And thank you for to the IOCDF and Jack MHA for your support of this this live stream. Have a good night, everyone.